Hello, everyone. I'm TectonicImprov, and today I've got another interview. I
Yeah.
guess I guess it's sort of become a series, in a sense. But today I have. Well, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Alex, or Rocketlex on most forms of everything, and writer of The Princess, which I believe is why I'm in here right now.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so at the time of me recording this, the video isn't finished, but by the time
Mhm.
this interview will come up, the video will probably be out. Uh,
Yeah,
I
looking forward to it.
thank you. It's yeah, so the princess, or if you it so all right, is the title the princess, or is it
The
if
title
you
is The Princess.
okay. All right.
The If you see her turn off the game, that's more like a tagline.
All right. I think I
It's
think
like if
both
you
will
think of
work.
it as a movie poster, it would have the princess in big letters at the bottom, and like if you see her turn off the
That
game
makes sense.
would
That
be
makes
along the
sense.
top.
All right, cool. So yeah, you wrote this I really don't like to use the word creepypasta, but
I
like
don't like to use it either.
but
I
like
just
everyone
call it
knows what you're
like a
talking about
horror
when you say
story.
it. Yeah, internet horror story. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that better. Yeah. So you were the author of the internet horror story, The Princess, which
Yes.
it made the rounds back in the day.
Yeah, it got pretty popular in the thread for which I was writing it. And I guess some other people liked it.
The thread. Were you on something
Something
awful?
awful.
Something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was the genesis of the whole thing. Was there was a thread in the games we were looking at a bunch of video game creepypasta stories. It inspired me to write my own, mostly because I saw a bunch of cliche traps that the stories would tend to fall into. And it gave me an idea to write a story of my own that took the basic idea, but in a slightly different direction that maybe wouldn't be as tropey, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree. You can definitely kind of you can get that. You can tell that like uh the author of the story like knew about a lot of like trappings and stuff of the genre and kind of
Right.
plays around with it, obviously, because I'm talking to him right now.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of see the inspirations in stuff like
Mm,
Ben Drowned
yeah.
and that. Remember that Godzilla NES creepypasta
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
That was also a bit like one of the things that I read that idea in my head.
I actually really like that. I well, okay.
I
I
like it too. But there were also some things about it. Like I never liked the ending,
Yeah, I don't think anyone did.
and a big part of sort of when I started writing The Princess, like I had some rules
Yeah,
of, okay, I'm not going to do realistic anything appears on the screen, and instead, if the princess does manifest something, it looks terrible. Like it looks worse than the
yeah.
graphics of the game that she's in.
And like any sort of manifestations into real life uh is never shown.
Right, is never shown.
It's
And
all up to your
also,
imagination.
so it was important to me that the main characters don't defeat the princess at the end.
Yeah.
It doesn't just become this weird hero turn at the end,
Mm.
which was the thing about the Godzilla one that I was like, this is
Yeah, it
this is just
is.
like an action sequence at the end.
It's a little weird at the end of that story because like the
It's
way
him
he's
like stealing a
describing
demon
it.
away.
Yeah, he's like, cause like the way he's describing it, he's like beating red or whatever, and you like
He's
see the
so good at
screenshots.
video games that he banishes a demon.
Yeah, but like he's just sitting in the chair clacking on an NES controller. So how like
Right.
cool can you make that look? The sprite work in that was really good though.
Like
Like
I love that story, even with its
yeah,
flaws.
in spite of its flaws, I also like it a lot.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's good. Even with its flaws, it makes for good sort of camp horror in a way.
Yeah, and just like the designs that are made up are just like genuinely well done.
Oh yeah.
But
I love I the guy who made it was talking about his inspirations, and it was basically just him screwing around and making those sprites,
yeah,
and then the idea of making a story about them,
you can
which I thought was funny.
in a way you can kind of tell that the story came second, at least near the end. Uh, but this isn't about the
Right.
Godzilla one. Uh, all right. So I think you kind of answered this already, but w- were there any like inspirations besides like Ben Drowned or whatever that and the NES Godzilla creepypasta that inspired you to write the
Well,
princess?
in terms of inspirations that aren't like game creepypastas and wanting to make my own, I think the biggest inspiration of the princess was an anime,
Okay.
Paranoia Agent. You
Ooh.
ever heard of that?
I have heard of it, but I've never gotten around to watching it. I
It's
really want to though.
really good. It's like my favorite anime ever, and it is about this creature or being named Shonen Bat, mysterious entity that attacks people at night, and people talk about him and think about him and share his story, the more powerful he becomes. And a lot of the show is a lot to it, but it's almost like an anthology series where where every episode is focusing on a different person and they're run in with this character, and it's about how the legend grows and grows, so the monster gets stronger and stronger.
Right, yeah.
That's a lot of where the princess came from. I always It's a longer form story than a lot of creepypasta, but part of it was that I thought of it more like an anthology.
Yeah, I can kind of see
Like
that.
the different chapters shift between different characters, and the Princess Society was really more just meant to be a conceit to have a bunch of different
Stories being told.
short stories.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So I when I started doing it, I thought, well, this series could kind of go forever because it's just an anthology.
Mm.
Like my original idea was that I would just keep coming up with different stories encounter with the princess, and it would always be tied to this metafiction of this internet community gathering stories about people.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I just realized that I couldn't maintain that. And
Mm.
also I so part 8, the sisters.
Uh no no hard feelings or anything. It's
Yeah.
uh I do really like the story. I just uh
Well, here's the thing. That was my favorite chapter of the story.
oh, I'm sorry.
But no, I get it. See, I think it would have worked better if there had been like 5 stories like that.
Yeah.
But the problem was that I wrote that story and I was like I can't do another story like this. I love the pacing of this. I love the structure of it. I kind of feel like in a way I've written the best contained story of Anne. And you'll notice in the history, if you look in the like big gap, and the big gaps start after I wrote that,
Mm.
because it sort of threw into disarray what I was going to do with this story. Because it's like, well, now I can't just keep churning things out. I kind of just want to end it. Like I've kind of peaked the story in a way.
So that kind of leads me into uh the second question I had was not necessarily if it was written all at once, but was there like a so you didn't have a general outline in mind.
I did have an outline.
You did have an outline. Okay.
Yeah, it was almost entirely outlined from the beginning, except for Sisters happened, which was supposed to sort of become this longer series of self-contained
It
stories.
was supposed to like jumpstart into
Yeah,
the more
a much long
anthology idea. Okay.
yeah, the much longer anthology idea. But all the rest of it, like the way that it starts, the way that it ends, that was all planned from the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, I can. You can kind of tell, but I figured I'd ask.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know you had this anthology idea plan. Um,
Yeah.
it's
And it is still an anthology
yeah,
series.
it is
Like
still there
yeah.
because the what was it? The first chapter is almost self-contained in a way.
Yeah, it's the narrator, and then you get like Adam and Brian, and then you get the sisters, and then you get the development story, and
Hmm.
so it is an anthology
Yeah,
tied
yeah,
together than I thought they were going to be.
that's interesting. So, so are there any were there any stories or ideas you had that just like didn't make the cut or anything?
Um, hmm.
Or was it more like once you wrote the sisters you realized that maybe the anthology idea uh
The thing is that they were kind of all would have been structured very similarly to the sisters.
okay.
And can't really think of. Well, I guess we can get into about the Anna's Dream Diary
Yeah, yeah, I
thing.
had I had that I had that as one of my questions.
Yeah, so that was going to be a sequel to The Princess, and I wrote
Yes.
like 4 chapters,
Because I remember reading that
and
back
it
in the
just wasn't
day.
working out.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, you go.
well, it just wasn't working out quite like I wanted, so I didn't continue it. But I would say that that was the big ideas didn't get used. That's sort of the biggest thing that I scrapped was having this whole second story that
Yeah.
was more weird dreams that this person is having because the princess is connecting to her mind.
Mm. So, to anyone who's watching or listening to this that
Yes.
doesn't know what we're talking about, um, the blog spot that hosts the whole princess story,
Yes.
originally, it used to have some more entries called Anna's Dream Diary, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Uh, now, your recollection of the story will obviously be better because one, you wrote it, and two, I read it a long time ago. I don't know
Yeah, I
when.
want to hear what you remember it being about.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, this I think there was only like two or maybe three chapters of this when I
Yeah.
when I found it, and it was I think it was about like one of the devs on the Hero and Princess game, or
Yes.
like one of the testers or something was just having some sort of weird connection to the princess.
Yeah,
Um,
it was an artist who
right. Okay.
had been the lead artist after the guy who created the princess, Mr. Carver, had been fired,
Hmm.
and it's contacting her in her dreams.
So
It,
was this is just a shot in the dark, but was she like trying to communicate with this Anna character to like subliminally put herself back in the game or whatever because she's like
yeah,
the lead artist.
like basically saying,
Don't forget about me,
don't let me
right?
be forgotten, don't get rid of me
Right.
is the
Okay, that makes
message that
sense.
I'm going for. Um, here's the thing: those chapters aren't deleted,
They're not
privated on that
private.
blogspot
Okay.
account. So I could continue with it if I wanted to, but I don't know. It just something about it wasn't coming together. It was awkward having to write all of these different dream sequences
Hmm. Yeah, I can understand
that
that.
I felt that they were. You are ultimately, even if it is like creepy things happening, you are ultimately just hearing someone describing their dreams.
Yeah.
Feel very much like dreams. I didn't want it to just be, oh, he's just in another world. I wanted it to feel like a dream was happening, but I'm not sure how well that worked out. And
From what
yeah,
I
go ahead.
remember, it just kind of it seemed like it was taking a while to get somewhere, I guess.
Yeah,
But
it
uh
did. Yeah, that was a big part of it. Thinking maybe this would work better in a different medium, like maybe if I like maybe a web series format or
mm,
something. But just writing it out, working, and it just wasn't having the pacing I wanted.
understandable. Yeah. Sometimes this doesn't work out. Uh
Yeah.
I know. I could tell you from from experience with writing stuff myself. The
uh, I can tell you another inspiration
oh,
for the princess.
oh please.
Uh, this is another thing on something awful. Is
Yes. Okay.
there was a thread in the like Ask Tell forums about
Uh
soul bonders.
all right, I was gonna ask what is the ask tell, because
It
I've
was a
never been
person
on something awful.
talking about soul bonders and people that believe they are psychically connected to fictional characters.
Right, like the Final Fantasy house.
Yeah, like the Final Fantasy house. And thought that that was fascinating, but it got me thinking about just the sort of metaphysics of that and how character that's fictional but also alive experience reality in a way that is completely alien to a human being.
Yeah.
Like actual sentience kicks in, it would be just this nightmarish, almost Lovecraftian thing, like a living idea that exists in people's minds but is also alive.
Yeah. It's I think a lot more stories nowadays are starting to kind of take that idea and run with it.
Yeah,
Um Obviously there's Been Drowned, which I mean it came before you, but it
right.
but uh I had another example, but I can't think of it at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of web series now are playing with the idea of sort of metafiction and characters are alive. Like I could get really obscure and talk about something like 70 Broad or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, I think I've heard of that. Like
Okay.
just it's not entirely related, but way back in like the early 2010s, I was deep in like the Slender Man web series stuff.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I watched like almost all of them. It was insane.
Oh
Uh
yeah. And look, obviously there is some inspiration from Slender Man in the Princess as well.
yeah, it's
Like
kind of
of
hard to
being a
avoid,
faceless entity that there's
hard to understand. Once you know
yeah.
about it, it's there it is.
Yeah, I mean, obvious. Yeah, I make no bones about the fact that I was definitely inspired by Slender Man in the look of the princess.
Hmm.
Another thing
I never
that
made the connection personally, even
was
though
really oh, go ahead.
no, sorry. It's I never made the connection between the princess and Slenderman. So I think even if you were inspired, you managed to get away with it.
Yeah, I something that was really was when people did start making like fan art and fan like models of the princess and like putting the princess in Super Mario 64 and stuff like that. That the princess looked like. That I was happy that I had managed to describe her in such an evocative way. Actually modeling her and drawing her and making her, it was like, yep, like
Oh, sorry, sorry, my mic was muted. Right? Yeah, because you don't. you don't see any pictures of her in the
Oh
story
no,
or
because I
anything.
can't draw.
Yeah, right. Hey man, me neither.
Yeah, I have basically no artistic ability, and I had even less then. So that's why there's no
And yet it
association.
seems like there's almost I don't want to say canon, but like a agreed upon design for her and all fan art, which I guess
Yeah,
is testament to how well you're able to describe her.
I mean the only difference between how people tend to draw the princess and the way that I pictured her is that a lot of fan artists give her these big billowy sleeves.
Yeah,
I had personally pictured, but you know, I it looks cool. It makes her look like a ghost, so sure.
yeah, it kind of makes sense. It's almost like a gown.
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So you mentioned that the sisters is your favorite chapter.
Yes.
Uh, do you have any other like favorites from that story or like least favorite uh like sections?
Um, let's see.
Maybe
I
things you
like
would do
rules a
differently?
lot.
Rules, yeah. Yeah, I like rules a lot too. I think that's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I like the stream. I think the
Yeah.
second to last conversation with the princess. I think that I managed to get a lot of good imagery across in that one because it's one of the few stories that
Is almost told in
visually
like real
looking at.
time too, yeah.
Yeah, and that whole I guess kind of cheesy thing of where left me fills the screen and trying to visualize that in text.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's kind of something that
Yeah, it's one of those things that it would have looked cool in a web series. Like I
yeah,
had this really cool image in my head, and I tried to do a little
it
trick.
sort of like breaks the in a way it kind of breaks the immersion of like, oh, this is like a true story actually happened, but in another way it's almost like unavoidable for what you tried to convey.
Yeah, and in my mind, it's just the narrator trying to communicate what that moment
Mm,
felt like
yeah.
by writing it out that way. Is
What?
that I always tried to keep the motivations of characters straight for why they're doing things.
Yeah.
A big problem you see in a lot of creepypasta stories is you ask, well, why are you telling me this? Why
Why don't you stop her or just stuff like that? Yeah, it's kind
her
of
or just
frustrating.
like you got sent to a parallel universe. Like, do you want me to help you? What's going on? It and so I had that whole conceit of this is a warning. This is not a
Mm,
story. Everything I know about this so that you don't get curious and seek it out yourself.
yeah. What
I,
I
I I'm going to tell you all of these stories just to communicate to you how fruitless it is to chase this thing down.
I think it works in that regard. Like it's not really like the texting isn't really a big deal,
Yeah.
but I could see someone maybe nitpicking it, but I personally don't really mind it that much.
Least favorite chapter is probably the stories,
The stories,
short
really,
stories.
the like the ones where like the forum goers are talking about like, well, one time
Yeah,
in
where just like
Portal.
it's like the Vigilante 8 thing
Yeah,
and the
okay.
wrestling game and the portal. I just think that those come off as really cheesy,
Yeah,
a lot of them. Again, this is part of why I don't the princess didn't work as well as an anthology as I thought it would.
well, at least you tried.
Just, yeah, it was just going to be stuff like that. Yeah, that that should have been my hint that like I have a million ideas for things this monster can do.
Mm. It's
So
like
yeah,
yeah, that's interesting. That cool because I kind of I like that chapter because it's sort of you can I can kind of like picture in my head like main character just like going through like threads and reading about like, oh, this guy was playing Portal and she showed up and I closed the game but she was still there, or stuff
Mm.
like that. Like uh I really like the idea
I mean, they
of,
give you a better example. They give you a better idea of what exactly this entity is, because
yeah,
up to that point, we haven't really
it's like a primer in a way.
established like what the parameters are. So it does work in that sense. So I don't think it's a useless chapter. I just think
Mm.
I could have maybe been a little more clever.
Yeah, fair enough. And then isn't it the chapter after that one is the one with Brian and
Yeah, Adam and Brian.
Adam and Brian
Yeah,
Adams.
I like that.
I like that too. I think
I like that you hear that. I like that you hear that story twice, essentially from two different perspectives. That first
yeah,
it is they decide they're going to do this, and then they're just gone from the forums,
yeah,
and it's
that's
what
really
the
cool
forums
because I
people
mean that,
do.
and then they throw like like
The like the
rip
fake
Adam and
funeral.
Brian thread, like that would totally happen on like a forum like that.
Like that was something I really like. Is I really is sort of writing these online jackasses and how they would respond to stuff like that. And
Knowing knowing that you come from something awful now, all of a sudden this princess society makes so much more sense.
it's it,
How you were able to
it's
like
something
make
awful, and
it.
it's a lot of different message boards. I've been on message boards like for a lot of the existence of the internet, and there's a lot like that.
Yeah, that was actually gonna be one of my questions. Was how like you went on like, or wondering what like forums and stuff you went on, or were you like, even did you even go to like private invite only forums back in the day?
Not really, just like fan sites, like Legend of Zelda fan sites and
Mm.
Pokemon sites and stuff like that, and just like the freaking vgmusic.org forums.
It's it's such like a bygone era of the internet, is all these like smaller, more tight knit communities that like congregate on like
And it was
forums
a
or
lot more
whatever.
immediate when I wrote the story. I mean, this
True.
was
Yeah,
eight
it was
years
more
ago.
relevant back then, yeah. But nowadays, I wonder if someone who reads The Princess would feel a little lost, like reading about the Princess
I think on
Society.
some level that still exists. They're just sort of like of friends and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like they're not text based, but those smaller tight knit communities still exist.
That
And if I was going to, and I, well, if I was going to do it over again, it would probably still be set in the same time period. So whatever.
interesting.
Society would be a Discord now.
Yeah. Discord servers, the Princess Society Discord server in the soft reboot for the Princess coming
Yeah,
2022.
yeah, in the Channel Zero version.
Yeah. I can't wait. Oop.
No, I have thought about what if Channel Zero approached me to do a princess series, how would I do the princess as visual series? Because it doesn't really, you can't just tell that story straight across the way that it's set up
Yeah.
and for text. So I was thinking that a visual version of the princess would be a found footage series,
Interesting. How would
because
you go
the
about that?
whole idea is that the narrator is collecting all of these different stories. So have it instead be that he is collecting all of these different videos people recorded of their attempts to contact this entity.
How would he go about like collecting these videos? Would it be,
I think that you'd still have the Princess Society,
yeah.
and they were a group of people trying to contact this entity, and they would share videos of their attempts. And we wouldn't learn what happened right away, but it's implied that there was some sort of catastrophe,
Hmm.
and they've all been scattered to the winds, and he's trying to track down those files
Right. Yeah.
to get as much of a record as possible.
Because whenever people hear like found footage, they think like videotapes and stuff. But we're in, it's almost
Yeah, this would be like, yeah, like recorded on laptops.
Yeah, that could honestly work, especially since the climax of the series is an actual live stream. I think that could
Right.
totally that could
Oh
actually
yeah,
work.
you could do the climax basically as is.
Yeah, it could pretty much fit in that idea without any changes. Interesting. Wow.
Another another bit of trivia. Uh, 9 and 10 are about the development of Hero and Princess, the game,
Okay. Yeah.
where the princess came from. And I knew that that was going to be controversial when I wrote it, that deep into the origins of where the princess came from.
Yeah.
Big The reason I wrote it is so the princess story went through a lot of different permutations before I started writing it.
Okay.
Told in parts 9 and 10 whole story.
That was the original story.
That was what the princess was going to be. Is it was going to be this story of the development of a game and a character that was deleted, but because that character had such a strong psychological connection with someone making the game, the character wouldn't disappear and kept infiltrating the coding of the game, and it became this whole thing. Original idea that sparked the princess.
That's now that you mention it, that does kind of make sense because when you do read chapters 9 and 10, they do feel fairly standalone, sort of like chapter 1 and chapter 8 and stuff.
I
Kind of
think
going back to that anthology thing.
hang on, let me actually call that up.
Sure.
Yeah, it starts by saying, I have been having some difficulty deciding how to properly contextualize what you're about to read. It
It's like
doesn't
brace
fit
for
in the
this.
story at all.
Yeah.
Like this, just read this. It does. I can't come up with a reason that I'm putting this right here.
It at the very least, you there is an in-universe reason for how
Yeah,
you would know about this story, and
uh,
I think that's well done. In that,
that it is just like a person who is mind not telling, not trying to tell a story.
yeah,
Give as much information as possible. It did give me an out to just have the narrator admit, look, this is inelegant, but this is where we're going now.
interesting. Okay, so maybe you've kind of already answered this, but would is there anything that you would have done differently if you wrote the princess today?
I think that it needed to either be shorter or longer than it is.
Hmm, I can see that.
Like, it needed to either be a much more contained story, a like full anthology of different stories, this character. And again, like, seen Paranoid, if you haven't seen Paranoid Agent, watch it because it's that I wanted for the princess, and I think the structure that the princess could have had if it was a little more fleshed out of recurring characters. There is a plot running through it, but it is also very much an anthology of stories of different people's encounter with this entity that changes them in different ways.
Hmm, I see. And you I mean, it's not like you've completely stopped making creative works or anything. You're like a you're sort of like a game dev now, yeah?
Oh yeah, I've been making independent games. Nothing like really there's actually a link to some of them right now on the Princess
Yeah, you guys can after you read the story, you guys can check out some of the stuff he's made.
of Sanity Check and Hero.rom. That's another thing is that when I wrote it was pretty much my first time writing horror.
Okay, yeah, because one of my
Like,
other questions was, what was your first like public work of fiction?
well, probably the princess.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think for
But
like a first try, it's pretty good.
which was weird because up until that point, I had strongly considered myself a comedy writer.
Yeah, I think there's some pretty funny parts in The Princess. To be fair,
Yeah,
some stuff that I think is intentionally funny.
yeah, like there is definitely a sense of humor to the princess, but I don't consider the princess a comedy.
Definitely not. No, me neither. All right, hang on. There was one line that from the princess story that I thought was really good. I think it's from the Brian and Adam section. It's where they're like testing the
I might know what you're
games.
talking about.
Where okay, sorry, I have to pull this up. Uh, all right, F-Zero played 5 minutes. Realized it would be a really hard game for the princess to manifest in.
Oh, right.
Earthworm Jim 3D. Fuck this game.
Yeah, I did like that of sort of giving you a sense of what was happening on the couch as they were playing those games.
Yeah, you're kind of just like this beginning section of this chapter, the marathon, where they're just trying to find the princess, Adam and Brian, and they're just like reading off a stack of games because I mean that's what you would do if you
Yeah,
tried to find the princess. Another one is like Harvest Moon 64. Played 10 minutes, got too frustrated trying to explain game to Adam. It also
yeah,
kind of it like a little while before the climax of this section, it kind of just sort of tells you what kind of people Adam and Brian were without really.
yeah. And did you notice the one other joke in there is that they play Snowboard Kids 2 twice?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
They go
Play
back and play it again because they love that game so much.
this game rules. Snowboard Kids played 20 more minutes. No sign. Yeah, there is some funny stuff in this. So it doesn't. It's interesting because I think that a lot of comedy writers can pivot into horror pretty well and vice versa. I don't know what
Yeah,
it is
you hear
about
that
that.
a lot of how it used about how horror and comedy use similar like techniques of misdirection.
Mm. It is it's sort of they are pretty similar in a way in that like they kind of the whole thing with comedy is that like it subverts expectations to make you laugh,
Right.
where horror is like subverts expectations to scare
Make
you.
you afraid.
So I guess yeah, maybe the same techniques could work. Uh,
Yeah, I'm trying to. I see. What I thought that the line you were going to talk about is the one at the very end of that chapter. Appears, and the last line is, "So yeah, I already told you Adam dies, so you can
yeah,
get
yeah, yeah,
some
yeah.
ghost."
That's a good line too, because I
That
mean
was one of my favorite lines.
it kind of cuts the tension a bit, but like in a good way. Because I
Yeah,
mean we know how this story ends, so it doesn't
yeah,
really.
and that was another thing is that the death in the story is told ahead of time that it's going to happen.
Mm,
My idea for that was I wanted the tension to be you know this character is going to die, but you don't know how.
yeah,
Like the I was I was thinking about that whole like Hitchcock bomb under the table. People are talking, and you know as the audience that there's a bomb under the table, but they don't know that the tension comes from when are they going to find out?
right,
Are they going to find out?
yeah, yeah. You can, and I think you do a good job of that.
Yeah, because and that was another reason that I had all of those rules because I thought that it was a lot scarier. Was always an out for people. Like there is always a
Yeah,
way to get rid of the princess
there.
and to
I
then
love
have
that.
reasons why people don't.
Yeah,
Like
I
people have to choose. Sometimes it's through ignorance, sometimes it's through arrogance, but people always have the out to get away.
but for one reason or another, they just don't. They can't help themselves.
Yeah, and that was like the big core thing of the princess is this idea of when something gets in their head like this, they just can't leave it alone. If
Hmm.
people would just leave this alone, it would go away. Can't stop poking at it.
Yep. Yep.
I think that that's a lot more interesting than just horror stories where someone, I even have this problem with the Silent Hill games.
Hmm.
Silent Hill games are almost everyone is about a character who just stumbles ass backwards into Silent Hill
Yeah.
without knowing anything about it. I would love to see a Silent Hill game where you play as a paranormal investigator who has heard all the stories and is actively like going to
See what the
more
big deal
interesting.
is. Yeah. Well, I hope you look forward to the Silent Hill slot machine coming out soon,
Ah,
which I'm sure has some sort of private investigator main character. I mean, who knows? That could have been the plot of Silent Hills.
that could have
Oh
been.
well, there goes that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really do like that that the princess isn't like this un like unbeatable, uh
Unknowable.
yeah, an infallible sort of
Like I
thing.
like you do know what her deal is. And I think that that sort of separates her from something like Slenderman, which is just like, who knows?
Yeah, a lot of uh horror web series people who use Slenderman usually have to like add secondary characters to sort of
Yeah.
supplement the fact that Slenderman is just kind of like there and doesn't really have a motive or anything.
I
Or
like that's sort of a cool thing that I've noticed because I've followed a lot of those
I like it a lot
like
too.
Slenderman series as well. And it's interesting to me how every single one of them is a secondary villain,
Mm,
and every one of them stops being about Slenderman after a
yeah,
while.
yeah, like
Uh,
Tribe 12. It's got that whole cabal
I
of
mean,
other
Tribe 12, like
characters.
Slenderman is almost just just a thug
Yeah, he's
that
he's really just
the
like,
bad guys send out.
and like same thing with like Everyman Hybrid is like
Hybrid, yeah,
he's really incidental by like the halfway point, and it's really
right,
more about like habit or whatever.
right.
But I
So with
uh,
the princess, I think that explaining her backstory and explaining her motivation was could still be the central villain because I don't like writing characters that are just evil. Like that the
I
princess,
get that.
you understand why she's doing what she's doing, and it's kind of tragic.
Yeah, I can
She
understand that.
she lives on being thought about,
Hmm.
on the edge of being forgotten, and it hand she's incredibly dangerous.
Yes, incredibly.
Yeah,
But almost, I like one another thing I think that's interesting about her is that like she isn't immediately a threat like ever,
right.
and
Yeah, she always just wants to play with people.
yeah, she's just like there, and if you don't know any better, there's nothing there's nothing really that happens, I suppose,
Yeah,
until, well, and until you keep playing with
something
her.
happens.
Yeah, until something happens. But most people have the wherewithal to realize that things are weird and just shut off the game. But the more you know about the princess, the more
The
you
more you
want to
want
keep the game
to,
going to
yeah, you
figure out
want
what
to
the
figure
hell
out
is
what's going
happening.
on.
Yeah. And I like all the ways you sort of play around with the pre-established rules of the princess, where like it's established, like I think in the last part or the last two parts or whatever, is that she can only be in one place at a time. I think that's a really interesting thought, because it's sort of just like it sort of
Well,
just cements the fact that it's that the princess is like one entity and isn't like this
yeah. I'll
almost
say this though. You can't necessarily take any rules that the characters say as being
exactly yes yeah and
his abilities.
I,
In particular, there is one thing that the characters believe that I can tell you right now is not actually true about the princess.
yeah,
And that is the idea that she can't leave games of her own accord.
that's interesting.
That
Is
is
that's not in the
actually
story,
not
is it?
true.
That's just
That's just something that people believe. The reason she was staying in that game for all that time is that she wanted to be there.
that makes sense. But yeah, that's interesting.
But that's the thing is that all of the rules are kind of
They're just
like that. They're based on
observations.
observations, but
Mm.
she can kind of be I maybe she could be in multiple places at the same time if she like infected a server
Yeah, that's true.
in multiple instances.
Well,
That was actually
none of
in
the people in the society ever had like a server, so they couldn't. No one played Minecraft. Couldn't tell
in
you.
the rules. In the rules chapter, it mentions that the princess has trouble
With
infiltrating
online
online games.
games. Yeah.
I had that was the reason is that the princess would have to be in the server and not the client
Mm.
in order to a game, and she doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
She doesn't know how that works.
And like possibly if like everyone on the server knew about her, it could be her like
It could,
she
yeah,
could
it could
be
be very
strong
powerful,
enough.
but she was made at a time before games were online and had
Yeah.
servers, so she
Exactly.
doesn't understand how to infect a game server.
It's all she's almost like a wild animal in a
But yeah,
sense.
I have, in terms of how she thinks, I have always compared her to Frankenstein's monster.
Mm.
Just this very instinct driven, not quite an animal, but not especially intelligent.
Yeah. Sort of like in a constant state of fight or flight.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I can totally see that. And that thing you were talking about with the rules are more like observations is something I noticed when I was reading the story again to sort of to make this video. And it's some it I mentioned in the video that you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too, because
Yeah.
you get to establish these rules which uh, are really more like observations. They don't necessarily have to be true, but since we only have so much of the story as far as we're concerned, they are true, until they're proven otherwise, really. And
Yeah.
I
And
oh sorry, you go.
I mean, at risk of sounding pretentious,
Hey man,
that
you're a writer.
in a way, I think that's sort of how a lot of things in life are.
True. Yeah.
You have all of these that as a person can only ever kind of understand things.
Yeah.
That in reality, everything is the convergence of so many different elements that you're never really going to be able to know concretely how everything works.
Preconceived notions can only get you so far.
Yeah, and the princess is sort of one of those things where fully understand it, and it's part of our human nature to want to believe that we understand things.
Hmm.
In the case of the princess, you shouldn't. You shouldn't try to understand entirely what she is. You should just walk away.
Shouldn't bother. Just not worth it. And that, but people can't help themselves.
Right.
It's age old. It's the age old story. Curiosity killed the cat.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the real tagline to the princess.
Yeah, it says that right in the opening.
Excellent. Exactly. See.
Curiosity killed the cat. Curiosity has killed at least 4 people thus far.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I
Yeah.
I do feel. I will also say, just overall, that I've become a better writer in since I wrote this.
Yeah. Uh,
The narrator is a bit overwrought
yeah.
about things.
I
Something
think.
that was fun about.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
No, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Uh, the narrator, despite the fact, something that I've noticed is that like, despite the fact that he or they, I guess we don't know, they,
I can tell you.
yeah, all right, the fact that he sort of becomes a non-character
Yeah.
after the first chapter, I think would. It is a little odd that he sort of has his own like voice in a way. It,
Right.
but like, I mean, it's not it's just like a different way of doing it, not necessarily like a wrong way or anything. It's just it just depends on what you like and what you don't like, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it was important to me that the narrator be a character.
Yeah.
Um, that was a fun thing about Anna's Dream Diary, is because so much of that is excerpts from a diary of a different character.
You
Thing
can
that I
sort of
leaned
play
into,
around with different
something I leaned
voices.
into while I was writing it was the idea that this other character writes in a very different way from the narrator.
Yeah.
I even I almost exaggerated how like flowery the narrator is in describing things, but Anna had this very like clipped matter of fact way of writing,
Very blunt.
and so you would cut between the two of those. So that was fun. I do like the fact that the was a character of his own, even if he was a bit overwritten.
Regardless, I don't think it's a huge blotch on the story or anything. But
Mm.
yeah, you wrote. I mean, the first. I don't know when this was first written on Something Awful, and then subsequently released on put on like a blog spot or whatever. But this.
This was written on the blog spot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this wasn't. Yeah, I would. The way that it happened was I would spot and I was posting links in the Something Awful thread of here's the
All
new.
right. So yeah, then that means that this story is almost 8 years old.
Yeah, well, 8 to
8-2.
because
Eight.
I took
Yeah.
me 2 years to write.
Yeah. Hey, it took me 2 years to narrate some guy's Something Awful Pokemon Blue Let's Play. So these things take
I've had a
time.
lot of projects take over a year, and I've not finished them anyway.
Yes, the the age old problem.
Yeah.
I can only imagine if consider you've since you've continued doing creative works like this, you've only improved.
Well, thank you.
No problem.
I mean, I do think that honestly, I think that I am better at writing comedy than I am at writing horror
Mm.
because I the natural little in people in the way that people speak come to me very naturally. So I'm good at writing dialogue that's just sort of sensational, but in a funny way.
Mm.
And it was kind of hard to do that in The Princess dialogue.
Yeah, that's that's always a. I feel like that's always a struggle that writers come across is trying to convey like the like the thoughts you have in your head, just like figuring out how to make this how I want it to be on in
Right.
words, especially like people will tell me all the time that I'm like really funny or whatever, but like I could not write a fucking joke for shit. I'm terrible at it.
uh,
But
yeah, it
I guess it's just a different skill.
I guess. I mean, that's the thing. Like different kinds of comedy, you know.
Mm.
Like there's writing jokes, just maybe just writing a conversation in a funny way. I mean, Garfield tells jokes. Like those are straight up jokes.
Garfield does tell jokes.
Yeah. But then like one like, I don't know, Patton Oswalt, and it's more just he's more just describing things in a funny way.
Yeah, it's
So there are different kinds of angles you can approach comedy. And different ways you can approach horror as well.
mm,
Like the thing about The Princess was not only was it my first time writing comedy, it was my first time kind of writing in this narrative style. Like I was much more familiar with screenwriting, just lines of dialogue. So writing it out like this, hey,
that's interesting. That it was. I feel like I've said that's interesting a lot so far,
mhm.
but I'll keep saying it. Uh, it's interesting that you say that you're more that you weren't really accustomed to writing to just writing prose or whatever, but I think you managed to do a good job in this story. Just like sort of, I mean, well, people were able to make this almost canon design the princess just through your descriptions alone,
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of like the pacing itself I think is pretty good, but not to say that your dialogue isn't good either. I think it sounds very realistic for the most
thanks.
part.
Yeah, I mean dialogue has always been so I do think I managed to get that in there. Oh, another just sort of random princess that I wanted to get in there is the reason that I chose time as sort of the
I was gonna ask. I actually had that as a question at one point, but I forgot to write it down. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
it was entirely because I wanted to pick a game that I wouldn't have to explain to people.
That makes a lot of sense.
I wanted a game that I felt enough people had played, or at least like play or absorbed through osmosis, that
Mm.
I could just describe something happening in the game
And
and
just
wouldn't
take it
have
for
to
granted.
stop and talk about like here's like here's where he is right now.
Yeah,
Like I could just sort of tap into that shared cultural knowledge.
that makes a lot of sense and is clever too. I
If
think.
there were oh go ahead.
Uh, Thank you. Uh, I think a lot of people probably would have just assumed that it was because Ocarina of Time is also a Zelda game like Majora's Mask is and something like that. But but that reason makes it makes a lot more sense too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it really wasn't found inspiration for choosing Ocarina of Time. But it, like there were other games. So you asked me a while ago what had to cut or
yes,
what didn't make the cut. I actually can think of something. Is I was the stories where it's a bunch of little short stories.
yes.
I was going to have one the princess appearing in Space Station Silicon Valley.
All
But
right,
the
yeah.
problem was that that's a game that so few people have played that I had to devote so much time to just explaining what the mechanics of Space Station Silicon Valley are.
It's just halfway through the princess, it turns into a review of Space Station Silicon Valley.
Right. And I'm like, this scary enough to warrant this.
Yeah, I
Like,
think in that case it is a pretty good idea to use such a universal game like Ocarina of Time, and it also so just something about like early polygonal graphics are just like kind of uncanny and off in a way
oh
that I
yeah,
think lends itself to horror really well.
yeah, I love it. Like
Me too.
that is another. I actually Thank you for bringing that up, because that was another
No
sort
problem.
of thing about the princess write down, but really inspired by. So I really grew up in the Nintendo 64 era of video games. 64 came out when I was like 10.
Hmm.
I It was such a fascinating. I still think that that era of video games is fascinating.
It is, and a lot of it's just a lot of it's almost like when games like got a second breath of fresh air with like the NES. It's people, it's these game developers trying to figure everything out all over again and
The thing
seeing
is
what
that,
worked.
yeah, those early 3D games weren't good. At the time, you sort of recognized that they weren't good, but it
Hmm.
was so new.
It didn't
Like,
matter.
for a younger person who didn't live through all that, I would compare it to VR games now.
Yeah, yeah. I
When you
think
put
that's
on a
an
VR
apt.
headset, even if the game you're playing isn't good, it's so novel to just be in that space that you kind of don't care.
Yeah,
That's how I would describe those early polygonal games. Were just You were just sort of intrigued by the novelty of being able to interact with a 3D space. There was a sense back then of like games could do anything. Like you didn't know what the rules are for a while. That was a big part of the princess, is that that was an era when schoolyard rumors
mm,
happen
yes,
in game, like get Luigi in Super Mario 64, or there's a way to find the Triforce in Ocarina of Time. Like that was a time when those kinds of really big schoolyard rumors flourished, especially on the internet.
yeah. It just it lends itself to horror
Capturing the
really well.
feeling of, and like there would be forums that would pop up dedicated to investigating stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like there was a forum dedicated to Banjo Kazooie.
Oh God.
and
Stop and swoop.
entire Yes, Stop and Swap, entirely about what remnants exist in the code of this scrapped game mechanic that there was some evidence of. Swap things between, and there was a whole forum dedicated to it of people just data mining both of the games and scraping through everything.
Back when like data mining wasn't as widespread and easy as it is nowadays.
Yeah, like back when data mining was just something that two people on this forum were able to do, and everybody else just had to like wait for them to
Mm.
get to unlock some new thing in the game. I think was
Nowadays,
another The feeling of those kinds of forums, I think, was another big part of the Princess Society.
yeah. As someone who goes on forums a lot, that part of the story resonated with me the most. I'd say. Uh,
Of just like, or there was I forget who made it, but there was a YouTube video recently of secret in Shadow of the Colossus, that
uh,
there was like a 500-page thread on game FAQs of people searching for.
I think that was Nick Robinson.
Yeah,
Yeah, I saw that
maybe,
on my recommended. Yeah, it's
maybe
just
I don't know.
it's
I
something about like internet forums or just like
No,
any sort of small communities.
Shadow of the
Yeah, look, make sure to call me out if I'm wrong on that.
Jacob Geller.
Jacob Geller. Okay.
Jacob Geller, he made this video. It's a really cool video about this. People were convinced that there was a final secret process, even though there
Yes.
wasn't.
Yeah.
And going through this like 500-page forum thread of people working it out, and it has a really cool twist ending that I'm not going to spoil,
Hmm.
but definitely watch that video.
One. I think I will once I get off my ass and play Shadow of the Colossus.
Shadow of the Colossus is a good game.
Oh yeah. I still need to play Eco too. So my
Yeah.
backlog's a mile long, but whose isn't?
Eco is didn't like it as much as Shadow of the Colossus, but
I think it's a harder game to get into from what I can tell from what I know about both games. It seems like it's
it
more art, it's more artistic or just harder to get a handle on than Shadow of the Colossus, which I think like even like people who would kind of turn their nose up at more like artsy games could see Shadow of the Colossus. You know, you climb giant monsters and kill them. It's like, oh, okay, I can get down with that. But then there's more to it too.
I mean, Eco came in at the very tail end of when I was renting games, and I
Mm.
think Eco is a very good rental.
Yeah, because it's not very long.
Yeah, it's not very long. There's really no replay to it.
Yeah, it's sort of like an
Eco
experience.
is a fantastic weekend rental, but I'm not sure I would tell people to buy it.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty cheap nowadays, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Like it, nowadays we have subscription service things like Apple Arcade, and that would be a perfect. You know.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, things like those investigation forums was deep in when I was younger were a big part of what the Princess Society was.
It's it's sort of like a lost it's sort of like a lost art in a way is this like like people going online and just just trying to figure out like stuff in like games especially just like trying to figure out like if these urban legends are true or not.
Like it's gone, but it's all in a way, it's it's flourishing more than ever because that's we have
It's
ARGs
different now, yeah.
that are like deliberately built to be these things that are
Yeah,
like
because
communities.
the people who grew up with these experiences want to put them in their own stuff.
I mean, look, people turn up their nose at the Five Nights at Freddy's series of video games,
Yeah.
but the the way that those games, those same sorts of feelings of it of community investigation, like there's basically a whole story in the Five Nights at Freddy's series that
Yeah,
tells
there's
this
like
whole other
yeah.
story that I think is fascinating. And something that games are starting to do more and more is have the game on the surface whole deep thing underneath that a community of people can get into. Five Nights at Freddy's does that. Noita now, which I think is going to be revealed to have elements of that. It's still very new.
Yeah, I didn't know that there was any sort of inkling of that stuff in Noita.
With Noita, it's more like it's not so much secret story as it is there are a lot of secret areas.
Yeah.
It really doesn't that you really have to think outside the box to get to. But also, you have Bendy and the Ink Machine.
Mm.
A lot of these like video game horror series will have these very just obscure story things that no one person would probably find. Now, I think that it's cool. This is something that's getting built into games now because part of why I wrote The Princess was I wanted a story that got across how cool that feels and how weirdly transgressive it feels to be investigating something like that in a video game.
It's sort of something that only video games can do in a way. Just
Exactly.
just this like this sort of like hidden narrative or just like secrets or whatever. Like you can put that stuff in like movies or what or like TV shows, but or like
You can
books.
kind of do it in like YouTube series
Yeah.
form. Like I mean again, like Marble Hornets.
Mm.
Marble Hornets had this whole like ARG puzzle solving element
Yes.
to it.
Yeah, the 2D arc side videos and stuff.
Exactly.
It it's something that you can put in those like horror fiction web series because they're making them in real time, whereas a movie takes months and months of
Yeah.
preparation and like post production and stuff. And like games, you can have this stuff ready to be discovered, and then you can just send a patch out when like a mystery is solved or whatever, or just have it in the game itself. Although I think a lot of developers avoid that nowadays because well, like we were saying about data mining earlier, it's a lot easier to do nowadays thanks
Yeah.
to computers and whatnot.
Maybe that's why I'm not. Well, I was going to say that's why I'm not so much into movies nowadays. But even movies are kind of doing that because movies are getting more and more serialized.
Yeah,
Advantage of this community interaction aspect, where these movies aren't standalone, like they are in connection with and TV series and online stuff, and it's this whole universe you can interact with.
kind of like what they do with the Cloverfield stuff.
Right.
It's just a it's just cool. Just these like interactive sort of fiction is just a lot of fun for a lot of people, I think, and it's only gotten more popular.
Yeah. I'd love to do that.
It's a lot of work. I've
Yeah,
thought about it myself, but
I've thought about it myself. I would need like him. I actually considered multiple sequel ideas I kicked around for the princess, and I don't think I'm going to do any of them.
interesting because that's kind of my last question. Not necessarily, but
So
I didn't want to be the guy to be like Princess Two when because it's been so long. But I did want to know
I
if
think
you were ever interested in this sort of uh, type of fiction ever again because I know you do like game dev stuff.
oh yeah. So I think Anna's Dream Diary is, if if I ever get, like, that is the sequel to the princess if I ever was going to do it
Mm.
in terms of that story, but also one that I considered but I didn't do was a story called Blank Vengeance.
Blank Vengeance.
Yeah, it's supposed to be funny because the idea is that someone reads the princess fictional story and starts writing a like fan fiction sequel to it, but
Interesting.
and so you are following person who is like posting to a fanfiction.net of like continuing the princess story, not realizing that the princess is real and that by doing this, the actual princess starts contacting him,
Oh shit, that could work.
starts slowly influencing him more and more. And it would be a more comedic story, fan fiction that goes more and more off the rails as the princess infects this writer's mind. She is basically writing the story.
Yeah, I see.
Um, yeah. I have put the princess as an Easter egg a couple of the games I've made.
Like how or in what
Check.
sanity check? Okay.
Insanity check. I don't know if I've ever told anyone this. I figured someone would eventually find it, but there is a place you can enter cheat codes in that game.
Okay.
Princess, there's a thing that happens, and I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Everyone at home. Everyone at home
Probably,
play sanity check. And let's
yeah, it's
and
probably the most elaborate Easter egg in the game. I will say, maybe play the game first.
yeah. Yeah,
It
everyone
changes,
listening should
it
just,
changes the game.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
The Princess Code does is it changes the game to sort of simulate the idea that the princess has infiltrated the game.
It's like a game within a game. You get two games when you play Sandy Check, everyone. So go check it out.
Uh, oh, there is another thing that I'm not going to explain in detail because it's something that I might do.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Don't.
Considered a game isn't the princess wouldn't be in it. Universe is the princess and is about a similar phenomenon happening to a different game. The same phenomenon that created the princess.
I see. Yeah.
So this idea of fictional characters being brought to life just by their creator being so emotionally connected to them. Yeah, and if I'll ever get that off the ground, but it's something that I've been thinking about for a while.
Yeah. I wouldn't. I don't. I don't want you to.
I won't spoil it too much, but it is something that I've been kicking around, and I do still think about the princess a lot.
That's That's good to hear because I
Oh,
was worried that when I DM'd you, it would be like, oh, you get my message, and you're just like, oh, great, some kid wants to talk about something I wrote like 8 years ago. Get
oh
over it.
no, no, I still think about it a lot, and I'm still proud of it.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and God, hang on, I was gonna say other princess thing I wanted to do. It's left my head again.
Yeah, that's all right.
What were we talking about? We were talking about a game with the princess in it. I don't remember. I'm sorry.
It it's all right. No, no need to worry. But if that's everything, then I think that's all the questions I had. If there's anything else you wanted to say, I think we could wrap this up.
I'm just happy that people are still finding it. I check in. The thing about Blogspot does give you some analytics of who's the, your blogs,
Uh huh.
and in there every now and then, just interesting to see. Like, yeah, people still are finding it. People still are sharing it. I always people I was surprised by how much people liked it while I was writing it because it was very much seat of my pants. We're gonna like this. Like, I don't know if this is really working. So I was always very happy with just how positive it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of creators are like that in a way. Uh, I don't know. I think it's cool that like even now, like making is going to probably show even more people the princess that hadn't, and so they'll get to see it themselves.
That's what I hope
Like
at least.
it, it's cool. Now it never got like mega popular. It's not necessarily one of those stories that always bring up when they talk about creepypasta or even video game creepypasta or whatever. Um, I just going through my notes. There was one other thing that sort of related to that. So when I was writing the princess, I didn't know how popular it would get.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but I had it in the back of my mind, like maybe this is something that's really going to take off. And the twist at the end of the princess, where you learn that every like image of the princess like contains her
Yeah.
and like is her, is what it says. Part of why I did that was just in case the princess becomes incredibly popular and like there are a bunch of people drawing fan art,
Yeah.
then at the end
I
I
see.
would pull that twist.
You're like, oh shit.
You've all invited a demon into your house.
Yeah, that's an interesting twist,
So
and like a
that's part
meta
of where that
twist.
twist came from.
Fascinating. Yeah. Well,
I think you're cutting out there.
oh, uh, that's no big deal. The
All right.
connection has been a little iffy throughout this whole thing, so I hope it I hope it ends up coming out all right. But
Hopefully.
uh, yeah, whenever creepypastas or whatever come up, I the princess is usually the one I recommend first and foremost because one because I do think it's probably my favorite for kind of biased reasons, but also because it's not as well known as something like Ben Drowned or whatever, which is
I
so to just like recommend it, I think is just a the right thing to do, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean it that's great. Like I kind of like I kind of like the mild obscurity of the princess. Idea of there being just these sort of the internet that people discover and rediscover.
I can
I
get that.
always love old FMV games,
Mm.
FMV video games from like 1996. And it always warms my heart when someone will stream one of those games that no one has thought about for like 25 years. There it is again. And it's cool to me in this era of everything being documented and cataloged that those little like artifacts can exist and there are things people can find. So, you know, I'm kind of happy to have put something like that out into the world, even if it wasn't a huge success. Like it found an audience, and and I'm happy that it continues to find an audience and people continue to just stumble on it.
Well said.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I guess if that's everything, uh,
Ah,
now is
thanks
your.
for having me on.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
For having me on
Oh,
on
oh, no problem. It's no problem at all. Would
your YouTube channel.
yeah, yeah. Well, uh, I I actually wanted to do a video on this last year, but when I was writing the script, I couldn't like I just like couldn't figure it out, and I just kind of like I threw my hands up in frustration and called it a day. And so this whole princess video sort of lay dormant for a while, and I figured I'd break it. I'd try and take a second look at it again because it tis the season, and
Yeah.
the interview idea kind of came a little later. So
No, you know, I am kind of glad like reached out to me for an interview like this. And I'm not like saying that I'm that, but it is cool to finally get a lot of this stuff out that I had been thinking about in my own head about this project. To
see,
have
yeah,
someone ask.
because you see everyone, this is an exclusive interview.
Yes.
You're only gonna find the rich princess lore on the Tectonic Improv channel.
This is the one interview.
That's it.
Mm.
I get the good stuff. Okay. Um, if that's everything, please feel free to plug your shit.
Well, I guess the only thing I have to plug at the moment is Super Mario Facts.
Yeah, you're the curator for that Twitter
Yes,
account.
I run a comedy Twitter account called Super Mario Facts. It is at Super Mario Fact, and it is just funny excerpts I find from the Super Mario Brothers wiki, which is in itself its own. I find it interesting that Facts has existed for 7 years.
Mm.
So I guess I must have started it right around Princess. In fact, no, I must have been doing it while I was writing. Like it just lines up to when the print, because yeah, I started 12, so I would have
Interesting.
finished off the Princess Mario Facts. And what's funny is now, year or so, Super Mario Facts has seen a kind of a surge in popularity
Yeah,
because
this
a bunch
account
of
popped off.
other accounts um that are calling themselves like no context accounts,
Yeah.
and that's sort of become the craze, even though that's sort of what Super Mario Facts has been for 7 years. Like I could have, like, you could call this Mario Wiki no context,
Yeah.
and that sort of facts is. And I think it's funny that now, like, no context Twitter things are becoming big. Facts is becoming bigger because of it.
Yeah. It's just an interesting, it's just the way that humor is sort of evolved online, I suppose.
Yeah.
However,
So
he
yeah,
is the
that's what I do.
slowest of the heroes and cannot jump very high. I'm just looking at the Twitter right now.
Yeah, I like that just because it is basically taking app
Just
and changing the and like rewording it to non-plagiarizing words.
yeah,
It's all just stuff like that. I love the Super Mario wiki. It is
it's
a really
pretty
good
nice.
fan wiki.
Oh, I just realized I
And,
liked
but it
this
is
tweet
also
already.
but it's also hilarious, just everything that wiki has to try to log in a somewhat academic way.
Yeah, when you're talking about Super Mario, it's
Right?
a little ridiculous in and of itself. But I mean,
It's like the combination of it's Super Mario Brothers, but also kind of academic, but also I'm going to guess largely written by teenagers,
yeah.
approximate an academic style. Just
Well, it's like several
fine.
degrees
Create
removed.
such a unique and hilarious voice.
Well, all right then.
Mm.
Um, no, we don't have to keep this in here, but if you don't want the lid blown off, but you can follow it. You can follow Super Mario Facts at Super Mario Fact, but
Super Mario.
you have your own like personal Twitter where you post
That's
like
my personal Twitter handle is at Rocketlex.
and this will all be in
Yeah,
the description. And
yeah.
if
You can follow me. Your random thoughts about game design that I have while playing ukulele in the impossible layer.
pretty insightful, I found I've actually I've actually been following you for about a year because because I was supposed to make this stupid video last year, but uh yeah,
I
um
just, I am a game designer now,
yeah,
not necessarily a professional one, but I am a game designer, and so I a lot more about just elements of game design and that I play, and I like to, and that's most of what my Twitter feed is just Like, hey, I'm playing Noita, and here's a thing I noticed about something Noita does with its structure that's cool.
And
They want
you're
that
I'm
at
sorry.
Rocketlex.
Yes, at Rocketlex. And you're are you currently developing a game right now?
I am currently in quotes a couple of games. You know, it. I would say, well, I'm working on a few things. One of them is not a game, and it's something that I don't really say about right now.
Yeah,
But
don't feel like you have to blow the lid off if you don't want to.
it's a web series pitch that I'm
Hmm.
working on. That it's something that I wouldn't be making alone. It's something that I'm going to be pitching to a group. But uh, yeah, I'm just working on RPG Maker games. I've got this game that I've been working on, and I've also been making things in that Dreams.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating game.
Recently in Dreams, look for Sauce Man,
Yeah. So if
platformer throwback to like kind of the Nintendo 64 era of platformers. But yeah, I I don't know if I necessarily have anything that I'm working on right now. It's mostly Super Mario Facts
okay.
and this other thing that can't really get into right now.
Hey man, no rush.
Mhm.
The I presume when you're ready for when it's ready to be debuted, you'll talk about it on your Twitter, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, follow at Rocketlex to know
Mhm.
when the next project is underway.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be worth checking out.
Mhm.
So I guess with all that, um, yeah, thank you for agreeing for this interview.
And thanks for reaching out.
No problem. And that'll do it. So I'll see you guys later. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.